So if Professor Ahmed wants to say a couple of words before he announces, please, sir, please go ahead. Before you announce the names, you want to just say something to the audience.
Okay, so fine. So I think we had a lot of discussion, but then I'll put across few points, just in continuation of the discussion that we are having. It's a very timely conference that you have organized, in which you are trying to, look at how you're going to manage those business enterprise and the survival and transformation in a post-pandemic world. For this, one point that comes to my mind is the supply chain disruptions. Supply chain disruptions and the global value chain. These two things are there. So first I'll talk about briefly supply chain disruptions only, because value chains have discussed as part of an informal discussion. In the supply chain disruptions, we have seen because of the pandemic, a lot of disruptions of the supply chain has happened. Supply chains are, broken. The international trade was affected, and all these things we have seen. There are 2-3 things that come up. One is the supply chain resilience initiative, which I just talked about. And another is the China plus one model. There was one model which came up that how do we go for something like a China plus one, right? So we needed to focus on, shifting our supply chains, reducing our dependence on the Chinese supply chains through a China plus one, that relocating some part of the, supply chains to other countries. So that initiative was also in place, and which was a part of the discourse, policy discourse also, and in the academic discourse as well. So ultimately, the point is that we need to have a business model, and our current business model need to be revisited, because the purpose today, we have seen that every country started looking inward. Okay, during the pandemic, we have seen every country started looking inward. Why inward? Because externally there was nothing, nothing going on in terms of international trade or investment flows where you have to look at, but every country had to look inward. So similarly, China came with a policy of dual circulation, right? Just like we also started looking inward, we had a policy called Atma-Nirbhar Bharat. Now the policy of Atma-Nirbhar Bharat, I mean, many people ask me, Atma-Nirbhar Bharat is like, are we going to reduce dependence on anyone else? So my answer has always been, and in various interviews that I've given, I've talked about, no, we don't want to reduce our dependence on anyone, because that interdependence will always continue in international trade. What we want to do is that we want to build domestic productive capacity, and therefore we want to become more resilient economically. That is the point. So unless we build on, you reduce supply side constraints and you build domestic productive capacity, that is the purpose of any policy like this. In China also, in just, I think in May of 2020, they came with a policy of dual circulation. Because dual circulation has its roots in, 1978, because all of you would be aware that in 1978, China liberalized. And then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, who was the leader at that time, he came with the idea of a great, international circulation. Great international circulation, or external circulation, we can say. The purpose of external circulation was that we need to focus on something externally, right? And that the whole purpose was how do you, go for international trade, investments, and the final ultimate aim was making China an export-led economy. So from 1978, this whole thing started for external circulation. And we have seen that in the next 3 decades after that, China has enjoyed an average 10% growth rate for 30 years almost. That was the external circulation. Now, in this time of the pandemic, this is very important for us to understand as well in a perspective when we are talking about a post-pandemic recovery. That in this pandemic, what happened that China came with the another side of this whole story of external circulation. And it talked about something called dual circulation. Now, dual will include external also and internal also. So dual circulation with internal focus. Now, ultimately, it was the same thing that we were talking about, Atma-Nirbhar Bharat, where the ultimate aim was that we need to enhance the domestic productive capacity. Because every country, every other country in the world was inward, had started looking inward, and every other country was trying to become protectionist, right? So therefore, there was no other option left but for every other country to start looking inward and improve their domestic productive capacity. Now, we have seen the second point just I wanted to mention is about the Ukraine issue, that of course, there is no justification for war. There have been a lot of war fought by countries which were democracies and fought by countries which are non-democracies. I mean, the US has fought so many wars and it is a democracy, of course. But at the behest of the NATO, we have seen, and of course, due to his own jingoistic rhetoric, President Zelensky led his own country into a war, right? He actually attracted a war on his own people. If you look at the first instance, and that everything happened at the behest of NATO, right? And the United States. Economically, it has its own impact because Nord Stream 2, besides all those things, I'll just like to talk about one pipeline, which is the Nord Stream 2, which was almost 1,200 kilometer pipeline, 10 billion euro project to be built under the Baltic Sea between, Russia and Germany. And then Germany said that it had to pull out and it didn't want it to go on further because in protest to Russia's recognition of those two independent territories. So of course, these things have a cost, and there is the economic cost of the supply chain disruption also, and there is the economic cost of the war also, which has happened. And therefore, in today's scenario, what I'll say is the companies, in order to have a transformational role, must try to look at disrupted business models and how do they bring about changes in their business models. Business models cannot be static. They cannot be exactly the same thing what was happening 2 years, 3 years ago. Now you need a complete overhaul of the business model that organizations are following, whether it is SMEs, small and medium enterprises, who of course has more risk and they have more ability to do so. And they're much required actually to do so, because SMEs are the ones who actually drive the global value chain. The large corporations are only lead firms who are actually controlling those value chain activities. But it's the SMEs who are actually picked up by the lead firms and they become a part of the larger value chain in different countries. They are the ones who are job creators and all those things. So business models need to be worked out. That is what I will say, based on the various situations that we have seen over the years, whether it is Ukraine war, whether it is supply chain disruptions, whether it is China issues, whether it is United States, whatever. So that's all I had to say on this issue. And rest, I think we have already had a good discussion with Professor Durga Mohan and ma'am also. So thank you so much from my side.